Today, we're going to be learning a little bit more about SCP-049, which is better known as the Plague Doctor.
The esteemed Dr. Thomas Morstead entered the cell of the anomaly. He'd been warned and even chastised by his colleagues. But who in the Foundation could tell him what to do? He was the best at what he did, maybe the greatest in the whole history of the Foundation. As he entered the room, SCP-049 bid him welcome, cordial as always. So polite, in fact, that you'd never guess you were talking to a killer.
They just invited him?
Dr. Morstead knew the truth of what he was dealing with, but he also believed he could get through to 049. Calm him. Exorcise the devil from him.
Okay, so they keep saying him, like this is an actual human being. So is SCP-049 a person? Is it a doctor? Because most SCPs that we've checked out in the past, like the hard-to-destroy reptile, and the tickle monster, and Shy Guy, and the statue, they're all not actual people. These are like weird creatures, which are most SCPs. They're either like objects or creatures, but this thing, they're calling it a him. So I wonder if it's maybe part human. Let's find out.
The meeting of two great minds. One of them human, one of them part human, part something that has never been clear.
See? It might be a human, it might be not.
A battle of wits. And like so many great battles, this one would turn into a massacre. Before we get to that fateful meeting, there are some things you should know about the anomaly known as SCP-049. If you saw him in the street, the first thing you'd think of is plague, because 049 always looked the same. A man dressed in black robes with a plague doctor's mask. But this wasn't a costume that could be taken off. In fact, it wasn't a costume at all. It was him. The robes had grown out of him like an exoskeleton. That horrible mask with the pointed nose wasn't covering his face. It was his face. A kind of shell that had seemingly sprouted from bone.
Wait,
The
actually?
first reports came during World War II. In a picturesque town in the south of France called Montauban, people had begun going missing. Children disappeared from their beds in the middle of the night and weren't seen again. Adults went to the market and never returned. Local authorities searched high and low. They scoured nearby woods and dragged the rivers, but nothing was found. Because what was happening wasn't criminal, there was no clue they could stumble upon or eyewitness who would break the case. No, this was something else.
So is he like giving people the Black Plague? Is that like his thing? I don't really know much about this particular SCP. Like I've never heard anything about it. I've seen it a little bit before, but I don't know if it's like giving people the Black Plague or if it's supposed to be like a doctor, like other doctors, and it's supposed to cure you of the Black Plague. So I don't know exactly what this thing is and what it's doing.
Something that the townsfolk could never understand. Word spread, and that's when a search and discovery team was sent from the Foundation. It was a cold, dark night in January of 1941 when the team found what they were looking for. They walked through the open door of a small house located not too far from the Grand Chateau de Richelieu to find a masked man sitting next to an open fire. And he wasn't alone. The floor around him looked like it was moving. Upon closer inspection, the team saw that the floor was covered with writhing, grasping bodies. It's patients, as it called them. Bienvenue chez moi, said the thing. Welcome to my home. Those so-called patients crawled towards the team, intent it seemed to cause harm. The hostiles, now known as SCP-049-2s, were deemed dangerous and had to be eliminated.
Okay, so he makes basically zombies. He takes them over using either the Black Plague or some other disease and then turns them into his zombie slaves.
A sight, it seemed, that didn't bother 049 in the slightest.
Oh my gosh, they just start shooting.
There, occasionally looking up from writing notes in a leather-bound book as his patients were gunned down. Once the carnage ended, it simply closed its book, stood up, and allowed itself to be escorted away. And that's the story of how 049 ended up at the facility, becoming a guest of sorts, staying in a standard secure humanoid containment cell, Research Sector 02, Site 19. The few that came into contact with 049 remarked that it was a pleasure for them. With its impeccable manners, vast knowledge of medicine and human anatomy, sharp tongue, and stinging wit. They almost became spellbound listening to it, caught in the throes of its charms until, with the simple touch of its hand, it would drain the life from them. That's why SCP-049 was classified as a Euclid. That's why armed guards were always stationed outside its cell. It's why doctors took great precautions when in its presence, and it's why Dr. Morstead should have known better. Remember, when 049 was discovered in France, it willingly went with the team, like it was happy it had been found. as if it had planned its own capture. When it arrived at the
Interesting.
facility, it didn't act like it was contained against its will. It was like it was returning home. Initial findings as to the biology of 049 were that it didn't require any sustenance at all, not
Really?
even water. It seemed content to be left alone with its notebooks. It did not object when it was asked if it could share some of its notes and gladly handed over its journals.
Wait, yeah, what
But
are the
upon
notes?
examination, it was discovered that they were written in the language that no linguist or cryptologist has so far been able to translate.
Wait, what? Okay, so he was writing down notes about like people or his patients, and nobody knew what they said. How creepy is that, dude? They got people from all over the universe to come together and try to read whatever this guy was writing down, and they couldn't. They couldn't. He could have been writing anything, and they wouldn't have known.
It's apparent
They have
that
no idea what it
049
says.
derives much satisfaction from seeing so-called experts struggle over its text.
Oh,
Unable to
okay,
read
so he
those
has an
notes,
ego.
A long line of doctors visited 049 in its cell, each fascinated by what they beheld.
He
It
thinks
was
he's
learned
the
that
best
it has traveled
doctor.
the globe.
That's what it
speaks
is.
many languages, but prefers to speak what it calls les langues de l'amour, French. It asked for only one thing: warm-blooded animals. The facility agreed to supply 049 with
Wait,
various
why?
kinds, including rabbits, cattle, and even an ape on one occasion.
Why would they do
Just
that?
like with humans, it could kill the animals with a mere touch of its hand,
That's it.
sucking the life right out of them.
That thing is so
But
dangerous.
that wasn't even the most incredible part. Soon those animals would rise again, as if reanimated by 049.
That's
They
creepy.
would become, for all intents and purposes, the living dead.
Wait, so can they spread it as well, or is he like the hive mind, right? Like, can he spread it to other things and animals and people, and then they can spread it? And it's just kind of like everybody can spread it, kind of like a zombie apocalypse. Like one zombie can make another zombie, can make another zombie, and so on and so forth. Or is it just like he touches one thing, and then that's a part of his army, and then they can't spread it? Like only he can spread it. I wonder, like, if he can spread it or other people can spread it too.
And they were hostile.
It doesn't
After
look like
several
it because they're
unfortunate
touching it.
incidents, they were taken from the cell the moment they arose and disposed of in the incinerator.
Oh
This
my
was
gosh,
not to
they
the
just
liking
burned
of
them down.
049, who would claim it had cured the animals. For it, the world was sick. It saw plague and pestilence everywhere, and the meaning of its existence was to rid the world of disease. Humans, it said, contained a virus and had to be cleansed.
I don't like
In the
that.
first days after arriving at the facility, 049 didn't seem to pose a threat to humans. It was quite friendly, in fact. It seemed aware of the fear it caused in staff, and would often go out of its way to make them feel comfortable and safe. This was a ruse, of course, or a canard, as
He's
049
just
liked to
crossing his
say.
fingers.
It had no intention to help humans. No, it had come for humans. It wasn't trapped. It had set a trap. One of the first people to truly upset 049 was Dr. Raymond Ham, a well-respected physician that had twice been a contender for the Nobel Prize for his more mainstream work. What had confused Dr. Ham the most was not 049's clothes-like exoskeleton, or even his ability to reanimate the dead, but the bag that it used. 049 was somehow able to pull a seemingly endless supply of surgical tools from that bag. Sometimes it would even pull out objects that were somehow larger than the bag
Got
itself.
it. So it's like
It was as
Hermione's
if the
magic bag from
connected
Harry
to
Potter.
somewhere else. And that's what Dr. Ham wanted to talk about on that fateful day. With 049 on one side of the cell and Dr. Ham on the other, he asked, "How is it that you can produce a great quantity of tools from that bag? I've observed you, and it seems to me that you are doing the impossible." "Dear doctor," replied 049, "the scourge, the great dying, cannot be fought with a handful of toys. My bag is merely the product of my imagination. It
Wait.
gives me what I require. You, dear sir, it seems, are limited by your imagination." It stopped for a second
What?
or two and stared at Dr. Ham. "I detect you are unwell," it said, in a voice not as amiable as before. "It's just a cold," said the doctor. "Ah, just a cold. If you had seen what I have seen, you would not utter such insulting words." Dr. Ham pulled out some papers from a briefcase and approached 049.
Wait, no, don't
holding
do
them
that.
close enough so it could read them. "You see," said Dr. Ham, pointing to the results on the paper, "those animals you say you cured, they were not diseased. They were perfectly healthy before they died. And your so-called cure, it turned them into something quite terrible. We found that if they were left alone, they began to eat each other, and then themselves."
So they do turn into
049
zombies.
did not respond, and after a brief pause said only, "A good day to you, doctor. Please close the door on your way out. You should get some rest."
That's weird.
Ham refused to go, and
That's
instead turned
weird.
the conversation to this real interest, the bag,
Oh.
demanding that 049 let him see inside of it.
What is he
"Very
pulling
well,
out?
doctor. 049
It's a
said.
giant steel
In
beam.
private, 049 began to pull a series of long metal poles out of its bag, followed by a rolled-up curtain that it hung between them, creating a kind of medical tent around Dr. Ham. It seemed to stare for just a moment into the observation camera outside of itself before whipping the curtain shut. Dr. Ham was discovered 3 hours later, crawling around the floor of 049's cell. Now another mindless undead.
No.
When he was retrieved by security, 049 didn't even look up from his notebook.
I mean, he was kind of asking for it, honestly. It's kind of like one of those situations where, like, the curious cat ends up dying, or whatever that saying is. I forget the saying, but, like, you knew what was going to happen. You knew that this creature could potentially turn you into a zombie, and you got too close. You got too close to the sun, and then you got burned for it.
Dr. Ham didn't get the incinerator treatment, but he did receive a fatal dose of drugs, a mercy. A removal team was sent to 049's cell, but it had said there was no need for special extraction techniques. It would go willingly, wherever they wanted to go. It was not, it said, an enemy of the people. The Hippocratic Oath forbids me to hurt a human being, it said while walking to the interrogation center. My only desire is to offer you my services and expertise. The floors and walls of the interrogation center room were painted a bright white. Even the table was white, which contrasted with 049, a mass of black sitting in the middle of the room. During the interrogation, it refused to admit or even accept that it had killed Dr. Ham.
Really?
I cured him. I removed the pestilence from his
That's
body.
so weird. He
it
thinks
said.
that he's,
It
like,
was later asked
curing
if
the
it
world of
regretted its
humans.
actions, to which it replied, well, good sir, one always regrets the loss of a colleague for any reason, but I stand by my actions.
He's
the
like
pestilence
Thanos.
must be abated before it is too late.
He just wants to
Every
snap
2 weeks
everybody
from
out of
that
existence.
Point, 049 was given animals. The scientists at the facility observed it time and again, touching the animals, killing them, before producing a saw or a scalpel and opening them up. Organs would be carefully removed with perfect precision. It was astounding to even trained surgeons just how talented 049 was. I require a close relative of yours, said 049 one day to a young doctor, who expressed shock that it was asked for one of the doctor's family members. I mean a great ape, said 049. Not your dear aunt.
Okay.
There were
Like a
several
primate.
instances of 049 displaying a crude sense of humor. Staff would
He's a
almost forget
comedian?
that the thing that they were talking to wasn't human, almost.
Yeah,
And
it
was
seems like it's
Dr.
like the
Thomas
closest thing to a
Morstead that had
human. That's an
supplied the great
SCP.
apes, orangutans, in fact, that had been rescued from the rainforests of Borneo, only to be taken to 049's cell.
Guys, I don't understand why they're giving this absolute murderous creature all of these different things. Like, I know that they're probably doing experiments, but their objective, the SCP facility that is, or the SCP Foundation, is to secure, contain, and protect. And they are not protecting. They are doing a very bad job of protecting the people and the animals from this monster.
Then one day, something changed. 049 told Dr. Morstead that its work was done, that it
what?
accomplished what it had wanted to do.
No,
and could
what?
someone remove the cured animal from its cell? I think you'd find that it's quite the work of art. A triumph, 049 said through the intercom. When the removal team entered the cell, they found the orangutan, or what was left of it. It was lying in the corner of the cell. The top of its skull had been removed, leaving its brain exposed.
Wait,
On its
what?
face was the expression of relaxation, and from its mouth it issued very soft squeaks, like that of an infant. 049 said, tell Dr. Morstead that its rage mechanism no longer exists. I've removed the amygdala and made some changes to the hypothalamus and limbic system.
It did a
It is
lobotomy.
cured and quite harmless.
it just-
the
it
next
just
day, Dr.
scooped out part
Morstead
of its
announced that he
brain.
wanted to visit 049's cell himself.
What?
After which he heard a chorus of disapproval from his colleagues,
Yeah!
all telling him that 049 was now too dangerous.
Yeah!
Dr. Ham was sick, replied Morstead.
Agreed.
And 049 has assured us that he would never take another human life. He's never
What?
lied to us, and I'm going to take him at his word.
I
It proved that 049
Okay,
had created
crazy.
the perfect specimen. So what was next? Dr. Morstead had to know. Everyone is sick, 049 told Dr. Morstead after the two had talked for a couple of minutes. The great pandemic has started. Fear not, doctor. I have a cure. No longer will
What's
you
the
humans
cure?
spread your disease.
What's the
I'm afraid you are
disease?
wrong, replied the doctor. This pandemic you speak of does not exist. We can happily live with our pathogens. We have done so for millennia. Dr. Morstead became angry that he couldn't get through to 049. I'm afraid you are suffering from paranoia. It is you who need to be cured. You have no idea, said 049, standing up. What are
And
you
of
doing?
course he got
shouted
him.
Morstead.
He
You
got
promised
him.
you wouldn't hurt a human again. I'm not hurting you.
He's
I'm
curing.
healing you.
He's curing and
049
healing
said and
everybody.
leapt across the room in a flash, placing a hand on the doctor's head. Morstead slumped to the ground.
Of course.
They were being watched in the observation room, and this had gone too far. He had to
Really?
be moved to the containment cells permanently. Mobile Task Force Epsilon 11 was right on the scene and burst through the door. No imagination, 049 said to himself. Those humans have no imagination at all. He began walking towards the task force, who opened fire on the anomaly, but the bullets bounced off its black coat and mask.
What?
SCP-049 calmly touched each of the
Bro,
members
of
of
course
the task force
he's invincible.
one by one,
Like every
draining the
SCP
life
ever is
the last
invincible.
one standing stopped firing and attempted to run, but again 049 leapt across the room, black cape billowing out behind him, and gently touched the man, causing him to drop to the floor.
Dude.
049 stepped over the bodies of the fallen team and walked out of the containment cell. The full details
got
of
out?
what happened next are available only to the O5 Council, what are sometimes called the Overseers. The redacted report that is available reads, Standard Secure Humanoid Containment Cell, Research Sector 02, Site 19, Subject, SCP-049. Date of breach, redacted. Euclid class SCP-049 breached cell and subsequently gained access to adjoining rooms and nearby buildings. Breach lasted approximately 3 days and 5 hours. Total
so they
casualties
got him back.
redacted, with redacted number of survivors requiring incineration therapy. Course of action. Department of Science Alchemy Division suggested injecting anti-transmogrify disinfectant into Class D former prisoners who were transported to site and allowed them to come into contact with SCP-049. SCP failed to reanimate injected prisoners and cure them. SCP-049 acknowledged this failure and surrendered to Mobile Task Force Alpha-1.
Oh, really?
SCP-049 then requested to be contained. Present containment under responsibility of redacted. Present location of SCP-049